I think there's no doubt in anyone's mind that the biggest issue we have here in West Berkshire is the awful cuts to public services that we've suffered, and now the cuts to schools funding that are coming down the line. And these have all been caused by edicts coming down from the Conservative government. George Osborne cut the core grant to local authorities, and that's lost us millions of pounds that go into our frontline services, our care services, our mental health support and so on. And this is wrong. This is a fundamental mistake by the Conservatives. The schools funding is another awful error. They're taking things too far. It's a step too far. I have never known head teachers write, as the head teachers of our local primaries did, to every parent to tell them they can no longer guarantee good education for their children in our schools. And I think that is a crying shame, a criminal shame. Liberal Democrats have fully costed plans to put £7 billion into the education system, to restore the per pupil funding and to triple the early years pupil premium. If you get it right when the kids are small, then that feeds through the whole system. If we don't get it right when kids are young, then secondary schools end up picking up the tab and the whole system crumbles. So I would say the biggest problem is funding, and it's funding cuts that have been made by the Conservative government. To solve the funding crisis, we need to put new money into the system. Liberal Democrats are proposing 1p being added to every tax band. We are the only people who are being honest enough to say we all have to chip in a bit more to pay for good health care. That would amount to about £3 a week for the average, someone earning the average wage. But it would add up to £6 billion a year for the NHS. This would be an annual payment every year. It would continue, it's ongoing, and it would appear as a separate line in your PAYE salary statement. We've also got a 5-point plan. Funding isn't the only thing that we need. We've got a 5-point plan which includes the creation of a cross-party commission, so we get long-term planning for the NHS. What we don't want are these changes every 5 years. For instance, when we were in government, we introduced parity for mental health and physical health, and the Conservatives have rolled back on that. What we want to do, part of this plan, is that £1 billion of that £6 billion will be dedicated to promoting mental health services and making sure they reach everyone at the time that they need it, not 6 months too late. In my mind, there is no good Brexit deal. The UK needs to remain part of the single market and part of the customs union, though. If we could do that, that would be better than nothing. We need that because we need the employment, we need the businesses, we need global businesses to keep their headquarters here and to keep their facilities here. Locally, I already have heard from businesses who are winding down operations, already feeding staff away to Portugal and other parts of Europe because they don't think we will be part of the single market. We also have an issue if we lose free movement of workers around Europe. Locally, unemployment's really low, which is great, that's fantastic news. But if we lose every European migrant who's here working in health, in the NHS and in the high-tech industry, then I'm not sure where we're going to find the people to plug those gaps. What the Liberal Democrats are saying is that the best deal would be a right for the UK people to have a final say on the final Brexit deal. It's another referendum, but every good contract deal includes a cooling off period, and that's what we're asking for. The Liberal Democrats are really clear about the importance of our frontline services, and we have a fully costed plan. If you want to look on the website, the costings are there for our manifesto to show how we're going to deliver what we're promising. So first of all, for the NHS, we're saying 1p on every level of income tax. That will raise £6 billion, and that's not just 1 year, that's every year. It will become a separated, ring-fenced tax that goes only to the NHS and to social care. It will appear on people's pay slips as an extra NHS tax. For the average person, that amounts to about £3 a week, but it's 3 billion quid every year. For education, we will put in £7 billion to both restore the per pupil funding and triple early years pupil premium. For the core grants to local authorities, I will fight that every step of the way. It's a mistake and we need to reverse that decision taken by George Osborne. Free school meals are wonderful things. They are wonderful things, and we plan to introduce them to all primary pupils. We have a plan. We've already piloted it in the early years, and the evidence shows that the children who are receiving free school meals are doing better. They are months ahead of their peers, and at that age, a month or two is a very long time. So we know that giving kids good meals in school is good for education and it's good for their health. So we want every school to promote well-being, and this is part of that. But also, just what is not to like? The results are improving, the kitchens are there, let's make good use of resources, let's keep children working hard at school and give them the fuel to do that. It's a real scandal that we've got people still sleeping on the streets in the 21st century. And that's a scandal for the whole UK, as well as for Newbury and West Berkshire. What we're proposing in our Liberal Democrat manifesto is that we take the whole country takes a new approach to this. So learning from volunteer groups and charity groups and looking at evidence that is being collected both in the USA and in other parts of the UK, we propose that a new system called Housing First is brought into every local authority. This means every local authority has a Housing First provider, and for the long-term homeless, people are given a house, a home, a residence that is secure straight away. Thereafter, they'll have the peace of mind and the lack of anxiety to try and fight their other issues. At the moment, we have too many temporary issues, which quite a few people who are homeless develop addiction problems. It's very, very hard to fight any problem like that, or a mental health problem, if you're insecure. So Housing First gives people a secure home and then helps them fight their way through their own issues and get them back into work. Really good success rate elsewhere. We want it here. I believe that Britain needs to defend itself, and we need to support our allies in defending themselves as well. If we don't do that, we won't have any allies. We also must engage in humanitarian support in other areas. So we will maintain a minimum nuclear deterrent. We're committed to that. We would carry on with the introduction of the Dreadnought programme, replacing the Vanguard submarines, marvellous pieces of technology. We've seen them, they're amazing. And what we plan though is to cut back from 4 submarines to 3, which will reduce the amount of funds that is soaked into this scheme, and we would put everything into a medium readiness situation, which again will save us some money, and the money that's saved through that will be put into equipment shortages and restoring equipment for troops on the ground, and skill shortages. We know that REMI, who are the local corps around here, we know that they are suffering shortages, lack of scientists, mathematicians and engineers coming into the forces, and we would look to improve that recruitment drive to give us the forces that we need for the modern warfare. I cannot believe that Theresa May is raising this issue again when we've got Brexit, which is going horribly at the moment, and massive negotiations are ongoing, when we've got cuts to public finances at local government level, we've got cuts to funding in our schools, we've got head teachers objecting, we've got the NHS in crisis, and she's talking about fox hunting. It is a waste of Parliament's time. However, I know that people care about it. I know it's something that people care passionately about on both sides of the argument. I'm not for cruelty in any form, but foxes are cruel animals. I'm not for the celebration of hunting. I don't like that. But I do support traditions as long as no one is being hurt. I also know that the training of the horses and so on locally provides employment. So what I would say, because I also believe that an MP is here to represent people in Parliament, represent the local residents, unlike our current incumbent, I would listen to both sides of the argument, I would hear what people have to say, and I would not rule out abstaining if the local view was counter to my own personal views. We're not looking to abolish inheritance tax. We are looking to reverse the increase that the Conservatives put into the threshold. They raised the threshold to £1 million before you started paying any inheritance tax, and we think that's a step too far. We would go back to the previous cap. It might be around about £650,000. That has not been fixed and is not included in the manifesto. But we believe we are a party of ambition, and we want people to do well, and we want them to pass on some of their earnings, their benefits to their children. But equally, we need to share what we earn. We need to make sure that the country is funded properly so that we can all have the care that we need. And for that reason, we would reduce the inheritance tax threshold, but we would not abolish it. Grammar schools is always a really interesting question, because grammar schools themselves have never been a problem. I went to a grammar school, I had a lovely education, and it served me very well. The problem with the grammar system, which no one ever talks about, is that 80% of kids at that time were going, back in the day, were going to secondary modern schools which did not receive the support that they needed. They did not receive the teaching support, they did not receive the facilities that they needed, and the drive and the ambition for those kids, many of whom just hadn't developed at 11 years old. They were no less bright than anyone else. They just developed a little later, and they did not get the encouragement they deserved. So for that reason, no, I would not support the introduction of more grammar schools, and our party is fighting against that. We would reverse those proposals, and we would certainly get rid of the programme of free schools, and we want no for-profit schools at all in the state system.